In 2023, we lost 4.46 million hectares to commodity-driven deforestation. That means that within 1 year, we turned an area the size of Switzerland from mostly primary forest into now agricultural lands. Of course, now we can use those agricultural lands to create value for humanity in the form of food. But what about the value lost? That forest was cooling the local climate, was harboring biodiversity and maintaining the local water cycle, things critical to human survival. However, right now in our economic setting, we don't really have a standard way of counting that value lost through deforestation and the value created through actually doing natural regenerative work on anybody's balance sheets. So there's little incentive to really do it. But we need this value. We need these ecosystem services now more than ever. So how can we create a way for our current monetary system to interact with it? To answer this question, Sonja and Martin Stuchte have founded a company called the Landbanking Group. And Mr. Stuchte was so nice to sit down for an interview with us today. He worked for 30 years at McKinsey, ending up as a senior and managing partner responsible for global sustainability activities before quitting. Now, the Landbanking Group is the second company he has founded to make the world more sustainable. There are a lot of really interesting concepts coming up. But before we dig in deeper, let's reframe this challenge that we're facing in a more productive way. Sustainability, is that really what we're looking for?
Yeah, let's first settle on the conclusion that sustainability doesn't describe it in the way that ignites the hearts and the minds. And we've worked with it a bit. We need to recognize it describes keeping things as they are and not getting worse. And B, it implies that this is a responsibility that we have to the outside world. And the real solution is in recognizing that we are internal to nature, that the human industrial economic system felt as long as there was infinitely elastic supply of nature, it felt like a separate system. But now that we are running out of it, we are recognizing that we are internal to nature and that the economy must be eternal to nature. And then I think different language is stronger. Something that works very good when we talk about nature, if we say people, look, nature is a critical infrastructure, and every infrastructure that you don't reinvest into crumbles. And we see that now that we have trespassed the regenerative capacity of this planet, we need to reinvest, and we need to do what otherwise you call a maintenance or an expansion investment. And we don't do that, and that's why nature capital is eroding it.
Seeing nature as critical infrastructure for human life, which is in dire need of maintenance and reinvestment, is a framework that I believe will be very useful communicate this issue to our current value system. Nonetheless, this dynamic of erosion didn't come from anywhere. There's a systemic issue that the Landbanking Group is trying to tackle here.
I mean, the fundamental thing is that we have always looked at it as an open-ended resource, an infinitely elastic supply, to use economic language, which it isn't, which it felt it was for quite some time, but now our nature capital has degraded to breaking point, and now it's not being made available. Another way to frame it, we are getting to the limits of how to describe a private good and a public good. Public good theory worked in an empty world. It's increasingly hard to establish or maintain the concept in a full world. And yet another way to frame it is that we are not pricing the nature-related risks properly. We are not pricing capital and risks associated with the old stuff high enough, and we should be pricing the new stuff with lower risk pricing. That we get wrong.
This pricing issue might sound irrelevant when talking about something as ethereal as the value of nature. But to our current economic system, it means everything. If you can't put a price on it, you can't plan for it, leading to externalities that can't be internalized. So this is where the Landbanking Group comes in.
We want to bring nature on the balance sheet, and we think we found a way in which that can be done. We give every pixel of the planet an ecological passport with regard to biodiversity, carbon, water, soil. We call it a nature capital account. And with this nature capital account, you can now enter contracts between those who provide nature capital, who are the land stewards, and those who need it, which is all of us, and increasingly more so. Through that, we have contractability, a new quality of equitable, trusted contract between the providers and the users of natural capital. And the way these contracts are designed, they also qualify as a capital asset. And that is important because once you consider money put into thriving ecosystems, an asset investment, you are not looking at it anymore as a cost, as a penalty, as a discount. Then you're looking at it as holding an entitlement to future benefits.
For these nature credits to really integrate with our current economic system, they need to be accepted as intrinsically valuable. So what value do they hold?
Take a chocolate brand, which happened to find out that cocoa prices have quintupled, and it's not clear anymore whether they will have cocoa in the future, which is a hard story to tell to your investors if you're a chocolate brand. And the availability of cocoa beans is subject to: are there still enough shadow trees? Is there soil organic carbon? Is there water holding capacity in the ground, which tells you something whether you will have a harvest in the next drought? And the next drought is next year, as we all know. And for them, all of a sudden, it wasn't a given anymore, whether they will have these supplies. And now we measure for every one of their land stewards, their growers, we measure nature uplift, another cubic meter of soil organic carbon, another cubic meter of water holding capacity, another shadow tree, another kilogram biomass of pollinator insects, which matter a lot in cocoa. And they pay for that. And every time they get something in return, not just a proof of payment, a receipt, they get a nature equity contract, which is a legal right, an attribution right to that unit of improvement. And then they look at this and say, look, what we've done here really is not just, we didn't just pay more, we have invested into our critical infrastructure that supports the earth, that supports our value chain. And now that creates a much better conversation with their bank, because the bank says, look, this is a much more resilient asset to invest into and to provide debt capital with their rating agencies, with their insurances, with their customers, with their board. When to think of it in asset class, of course, we always think tradability, securitizability, secondary markets, all of that. Before we jump there, currently it would be a real advantage if we have contractability before we have tradability. That alone offers a huge opportunity to redirect funding into nature, reward land stewards, making better land use choices. So even if there was no tradability at any time at all, that already would be a big progress. Now, however, we will of course crowd in more money, to the institutional money, and we have stronger price signals if we had secondary markets. I think this is a future that is thinkable and that we should also go for. There are first instruments that do that. You can just put nature attributes as a digital asset on a market and see what happens. You can create nature asset companies, at least that's something that's being attempted by the Intrinsic Exchange Group. You can take special purpose vehicles and then put them on the market or securitize them. All of this, technically, we have many answers to that. We have to agree on a couple of safeguards, which I happen to think are workable to make sure that we are not falling into the trap that we have seen with secondary trades on carbon markets. And the most important one is probably to ensure that every one of those contracts keeps rewarding the originator, which in a world of smart contracts and hashing data of the originator seems to be quite possible. So that would be, as far as I'm concerned, a very, very good way to reconcile many things at the time, making sure land stewards are rewarded, making sure it really feels like a valuable asset that you are prepared to invest into, that you can sell it, making sure that the market is easily accessible for the land stewards, making sure that there's a constant flow back into the fringes and that not all the benefits are just being felt in Zurich or in London or New York. I think that's an interesting design choice which we have, because technically we shouldn't be naive about technology, but we also should recognize that there's a real gift that we have been given both by the nature tech and the fintech community to create something that really could propel regenerative outcomes.
So the issue once more, setting technical challenges aside, is one of shifting our understanding of value. Companies now voluntarily buy carbon credits in order to appeal to consumers, but the ambition of nature credits goes much deeper than that. There are so many utopias that we hear about, so many dreams of more beautiful worlds, but there are very few transition ideas around how to actually get to that more beautiful world, and even fewer projects trying to implement them. That is why I find the Landbanking Group so fascinating, because usually when I would hear about somebody talking about how to create tradable assets connected to ecosystems, which then eventually can be speculated upon in secondary markets, I would just call it turbo-capitalist and read about something else. But the more I think about it, the more I get the sense that these are the most important projects out there, because they're the only ones connecting where we are at right now with the more beautiful world that we're trying to get to. I uploaded the full 40-minute interview with Mr. Stuchti alongside this, if you're interested to hear more about his ideas and the work of the Landbanking Group. I found it to be very thought-provoking, and it equipped me with a lot of really useful ideas to connect nature-oriented thinking with economics. What do you think? Is this project on the right track? Or do you think we should not integrate with the current system at all? I am very curious to hear about your ideas in the comments. Let's regenerate the Earth.
I've been quite privileged because how our life evolved family-wise, business-wise. And so it would be purely unacceptable if we didn't try to put ourselves more on the line, given where we are in history. Yes, but of course, personally, that's a big risk that we are taking, the risk of looking underly ambitious in the eyes of our 6 children is much bigger.